Hey, it's Mrs. J here, blogger-in-chief of prayerandpedagogy.com. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, and thank you for keeping up with me in this series, Not Another PowerPoint. As you know, I love giving my students creative voice, choice, and control over how they demonstrate their learning, but I absolutely do not want to sit through yet another PowerPoint presentation. So this episode is going to focus on fun and free alternatives I offer my student creators to demonstrate their learning. Today I'm going to look at podcasting, one of my favorite options. Let's get into it. So there are two easy ways that you can podcast with your class. I'm going to walk you through how you can podcast using either Flipgrid or Anchor by Spotify. It's going to be really simple, and I highly suggest using either one of these platforms, especially if this is your first time giving podcasting a go. And depending on what age group you service, then you might find one of these platforms easier than the other. All right. So first of all, let's start with Flipgrid. So I am in Flipgrid. Now this video is not a walkthrough specifically on how to use the Flipgrid platform. If you need some assistance with that, just let me know in the comments. I will happily make a video about using Flipgrid. It's one of my favorite platforms, and I love doing PD on Flipgrid. But assuming that you know how to use a Flipgrid platform, I'm going to show you how you can create a podcast episode using Flipgrid. So I have my group here, and this may be your class of students or a different collaboration of different classes that are all in one group. So I'm going to click on my podcasting group. And in this group, I have the topic that I've created for the first episode of the podcast. It's really simple in this one. So here, there's the podcast episode number 1. And as you can see, there are currently 3 responses that have been posted. So it's really simple to take those responses and turn them into a podcast. Now, to really give it that podcast feel with the whole intro and outro and things of that nature, you could also record your own video, do a little introduction or an outro, or have students do that, and you will be able to add that to the responses as well. Once you have all of the responses that you want to include in the podcast, you are going to create what Flipgrid calls a mixtape. Mixtape is simply collaboration of different submissions that are streamed together to create one episode, so to speak. So I have 3 responses. If I wanted to, I could choose all 3. Or I could choose to take out maybe one, and I only want to use 2 out of the 3 in the episode. So I'm going to take all 3. And once I have what I want to use in the podcast, I'm going to click on this drop down that says Actions. And I'm going to click here where it says Add to Mixtapes. So I'm going to create a mixtape. And this is just going to be called Episode 1. And now this is going to be the link to this mixtape. Here I can go ahead and put in a description of what is in this episode. If I want to give more or less detail, I can do that. Any links or hyperlinks or anything else that I would like to include here, I have up until 500 characters to really go into some depth about what is in this mixtape or the podcast. A couple of options you want to take note of is the ability to password protect the mixtape. So if you work with younger kids, if you want to keep this in your community or on your campus, then I would highly suggest you turn on the password protection and then share that password with people that you would like to be able to access your podcast episode. Maybe you are thinking about doing a newsletter podcast to go out to your families. You would share that podcast with the families along with the link that is up here where it says the join code. So I'm not going to password protect this one, but if you were to turn it on, you would just put a password here, make sure you follow those, and then make sure you share that password so that other people can access the episode. So let's click on create. And now I've added 3 responses to episode 1 mixtape. So if I go to the mixtape, here, a couple of things. I have the mixtape. This is the order in which the videos will, or the episodes will pop up. I can change the order of this. So if I want to make sure that my intro is at the beginning and then my outro is at the end, I can just simply click here and drag to rearrange the order of the podcast episode. And so when I am ready to have this viewed, the link that I would share with my students or staff or the community would be here. and I'm going to view it, what it would look like if I was to send it out. So this would be the episode, and here's where they would be able to start listening. They would click here, and it's just going to automatically play through each of the submissions together. I also love here at the bottom how it has like a little roll call of the credits of the people who are involved in creating that. Super cool for students to just see their name here and be like, oh, I'm part of this. And then have that down here at the bottom to really see who's participating in the podcast and whose stuff has been published. Boom, there you have it. First episode of your podcast is ready to go and share with the world or with your small community in less than 5 minutes. Now I'm going to walk you through how to do a similar product using Anchor. So this is the Anchor Spotify page for the podcast series that my students are actually currently working on right now. I love podcasting. Personally, I use Anchor to piece together and to publish our podcast. I do share our podcast out in the real world in order to give my students an authentic audience, but I do have middle schoolers and I do get permission to do that. And so we have a podcast that is available on Spotify. It's on these other platforms. And so I really love the final product that we piece together. And so this is what the final page looks like. And if you scroll down here, you can see our most recent episode from this year and then podcast episodes from last year. And our next episode is going to come out in a couple of weeks. And so one thing I want to point out here is this button where it says message. This is, I'm going to kind of work in reverse, but this is one of the easiest ways to get your students to submit their podcast submissions using the Anchor platform. So right here, they click on the message button. They're going to get a pop-up where they're going to be asked to record their message. Now here you would need to provide them with the prompt or some resources in advance so they know what it is that they are going to record. But once they are ready to record, they're simply going to click on start recording now. It's going to open up the mic and then allow them to record. Once they are done, just going to hit that record button. Once they are done recording, they're going to click on stop recording. They're going to put a name or however you would like for them to identify their selves in the podcast and then send the message. Okay. And so that message will pop up on the other side, which I'm going to show you shortly. One thing that is something to note about using Anchor is that in order to send a message, the voice message, you have to have an account, which means you have to sign up with an email address. So I would not necessarily use this for younger kids, although if you use like a group or a class email, then you can set it up that way. I'm also going to show you on the other side how you can have them record if you pull up the Anchor platform for the class to access in class. So if they do use it through this way, they'll get a message that says it has been sent. And then the good thing is that when you take their voice message and include it in the podcast, they also get an email automatically when it is published. So now let me show you the back end. So this is the dashboard for Anchor. And so when you are trying to set up your podcast episode, a couple of things. One, you can set up your podcast. That's where you give it a title and cover art and things of that nature, a description. But this is how you would piece together the podcast episode. So here you have a few options for how you piece together your podcast. Recording, simply it's going to record directly from the device that you're on. This is where you could pull up Anchor in your classroom or have a couple of dedicated devices and pull up the platform and then allow students to record right there in class. Really simple, like we did before. You're going to click on record. It's going to save it over here. Second option is you can have students send you files, audio files. You could even take files from Flipgrid and download them and upload them here. So if you do that, you'll click to upload files and you'll be able to add a file over here. If you have previously used audio or something that you've created or recorded, really simple, it'll be in your library. Click on the plus button, and this is where you're going to start building your podcast episode. Now, if you go back to the message button that we just looked at on the other page, this is where those messages would show up. So this is not the same Anchor account, so I don't have any voice messages on this one, but here is where you would have your voice messages set up. They pop up right here, and you click on the little plus button and add it to the episode. One thing that I do like about using Anchor is it kind of has a little bit more of a professional feel for the final product, because you were able to add music because of the Spotify collaboration. And then you're also able to add in like transitional sounds. So depending on what kind of podcast you're putting together, or your students are creating, they really kind of get into playing around with some of the different sounds and really making their podcast come alive. So real simple with that, whether it's messages, transitions, music, library, or recording, you just click on the plus button and you begin to build your episode. If you want to rearrange the episode in the order of the different sounds, you just drag it to rearrange it and you build your episode. Once you are done, you can save it. And then once you have everything the way that you want, you just publish it. It's like really just that simple. Come in, give it a title, give it a little description, just like on Schoology, and then you can publish it. And now it is literally out there in the world. Okay. And so, I mean, it's one and done. And then I will need to verify my email in order to publish it. But I mean, you literally just click on publish and that's it. And so one thing I do like about Anchor over Flipgrid a little bit is the analytics that you get. Flipgrid will show you plays and views as well, but it's just a little bit more detailed on Anchor because, I mean, this is what they do, right? And so that's it. Simply less than 10 minutes, you can put together a podcast series using either Flipgrid or Anchor and allow your students just a different medium for sharing what they've learned. So that's it. Podcasting 101 in less than 10 minutes. You can do it. I promise you. If you give it a try or you're thinking about doing it and you have questions, just drop them in the comments. I will respond ASAP. I love podcasting. I'm loving the podcast project that my kids are working on right now. It is just... It's blowing me away. And so I highly recommend this as a medium of giving students a voice and a choice in your classroom. I pray this was useful to you. If you have any questions, drop them in the comment. If you need a more in-depth walkthrough of using Anchor or Flipgrid, just let me know. Please make sure that you like this video if you found it useful. Share it with your team or your peers and your staff members. Comment down below and definitely subscribe. Thank you so much for joining me at the intersection of prayer and pedagogy. See you next time.